Hey, welcome everybody to Martinis with Scott, episode 151. Hope you are well. I am pouring myself a well-needed martini here. I hope you have a drink as well. When I say martini, I mean a glass of Fernie Distillers vodka, of which I'm running out. I'm going to have to run downtown and grab some more. Hope you're doing well on a Thursday afternoon. Welcome to the show. Cheers. I'm on about my third or fourth hour of content here today. So this is a well-needed beverage by me. Well, what are we going to talk about today? So I do my live, more or less daily touch base on live stream on YouTube and on Instagram. See if I can get straight in the camera here. On YouTube and Instagram. And the volume disappeared on YouTube the other day. So I'm going to repeat some of that content because you people on YouTube have not heard this. And the talk was about a framework for turning around any business. Any business that is in financial difficulty, how do you turn that business around? I've been doing podcasts and shows on Clubhouse. And I was interviewed the other day. I was the guest. I was interviewed by David Cohen of Gowling WLG. By the way, that'll be up on the Martinis with Scott YouTube channel probably this weekend coming up. So you'll be able to listen to that. It was the first time I've ever been a guest. That was kind of fun. And we talked about turnarounds in the context of one particular company that I've purchased and own. I'm the president of it. I'm doing the turnaround. And what I was being pressed on is, turnarounds, troubled situations are very dynamic, they're fast moving, and you get surprised by things. Let's get into that. But the truth of the matter is that's true, but there's a global framework, there's a recipe, there's an order of events, and that I work with. I've been doing this for 30 years. And so I want to share that with you. If you're looking to improve your business, turn around a company that's in a troubled situation, this is my framework. So number one on my list is you need to, the day that you decide that you're to turn around, you need to mentally acknowledge to yourself that you're in trouble and you need to set a vision to make the hard decisions and to move in this direction. And you need to stand up in front of your people. This is number one. And you need to communicate your definition of a new culture within the organization. Because if you have a troubled company, guaranteed you have a culture of losing. You have a culture of negativity. You have a culture of people waking up in the morning and feeling like they're going to go to work and it's just going to be a little bit worse today than it was yesterday. You work in a troubled business. Do you know that feeling? And when you fix things and you do a turnaround, it's not like everything just goes straight up, right? You go up, you go down, you go up to take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And when you're going down, when you're a troubled business, it's not like every day is straight down off a cliff, right? But you take 2 steps backwards, 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. It's the whole thing in reverse. But you have a culture of negativity and of things not going right. And what that does is it creates a confirmation bias. A confirmation bias we've talked about almost every show on Martinis with Scott. It's a pattern of thinking. It's how humans' brains operate. We don't analyze a bunch of facts and draw a conclusion. We recognize patterns and we look for facts that fit the preconceived patterns that we have. And if your preconceived pattern, if your confirmation bias is that your organization is a loser, then you're going to be negative and you're going to look for facts all the time. You're going to look for facts and you're going to twist facts to this negative way of thinking, as opposed to the opposite. If you think you're moving in a positive direction, you're going to start to twist facts and look for facts that confirm the bias that you have, that bias of positivity. And before you know it, you're going to start to generate some energy. You're going to start to attract resources, both human and capital. And that's why this show is a show about winning momentum in life and in business for that very reason. So you have to stand up in front of your people. And number one, in a turnaround, you have to say, we're in trouble, but we have a new culture. And our new culture is we are proud and we are positive. We are proud of our organization and we are positive. So that's number one. Communicate that message. Set your direction, not specific goals. Set the shiny bauble in the future. I describe it as this: picture yourself lost in the middle of a dark forest. You are lost in the middle of a dark forest. You're cold, you're hungry, and all you want to do is get back to your car and get the hell out of there, but you know it's miles away, but you don't know what direction. You literally don't know what direction. You don't know where to go. You're completely turned around, and you've gone a little bit this way, and you got scared and you came back. You went a little bit this way and you got scared and come back. A turnaround leader sets the direction. It doesn't even have to be right. It just has to be a direction. We're going over here. We are going this way. Come with me. Be positive. Be proud. Come with me in this direction, because what we're doing isn't working. Okay? That's number one. Number two, and I mean the same day, stop the bleeding. What does stop the bleeding mean? It's about cash flow. If you have negative cash flow, if you got money going out the door faster than you have money coming in the door, you're going to go broke. Simple as that. You got negative cash flow, you are going to go broke. You need to stop the bleeding. People say, that's hard. I can't stop the bleeding. My expenses are more than my revenue. You need to stop paying things. You will not survive if you run out of cash. The whole trick to a turnaround is to say, okay, here's what I need to do. I need to go from here to there to make more money. I need to make these changes to make more money and get my cash, turn positive. And then what I need to do is not go broke in the middle of that process. That's what a turnaround is. Define the process. I'm going to go from here and I'm going to go to there, and then find a way to not go broke in the middle of that. You need to stop the bleeding. You need to do that immediately. It is second in importance to setting the new culture and message of positivity, but it's 1A, 1B. You need to stop the bleeding. So that's number two. Number three is you need to start winning. You need to start winning. You need to set a cultural change. This is a show about winning momentum. You need to start winning. Just take little things and start turning negatives into positives. Navani Stainless, which I talk about on the show, there's a bunch of episodes you can look up in the past, and the podcast that I referenced was about Navani Stainless. We did two things almost immediately. Number one is the plant was filthy. This is a manufacturing company that I bought in June 2020. You go back and you just like, wow, this is filthy. It hasn't been cleaned. Turns out there's no sanitation staff. They'd let their sanitation staff go, or the person left, and then they didn't bother hiring anybody else as the company was in a decline. So one of the first things we did is we said we need to clean up. We need to be proud of our working environment. We can't be just in a place that's too gungy. Nobody even wants to walk back there. So we set an initiative. We made a promise to employees. We're going to hire sanitation. We did. And we started cleaning up. I mean, and it took a month to hire somebody. It took that person a month just to get on top of things. It was a process. It wasn't from 0 to 1 or 0 to 100 all at once, but it was a process, and things started to look and feel a little bit better. We were short on staff. It was a problem day one. Laborers in the back. Again, it's a manufacturing organization. And I learned immediately that we're in a remote area as opposed to a city center. We have to attract people, and yet we are the lowest payer across the board on a per hourly basis for the laborers. And so one thing we did immediately was a $2 an hour raise for everybody. Everybody who was on the hour, as opposed to salary people up front, got a $2 raise, not based on merit, not based on seniority, based on nothing more than I said to the people, under my watch, we're not going to be the bottom of the barrel. We're not going to be that company. We may not be the cream anytime soon. We will eventually. That'll be a goal. That'll be a direction that we want to head in. But right now, starting today, we're not going to be the bottom of the barrel. How are we going to change that? $2 an hour across the board. It sends a message of winning. It sends a message of cultural change, but it also helped us start attracting other people because they saw changes, positive changes going on within that company, right? So you start winning on something. That's the next point. So talk to the people about positivity and a cultural change. Stop the bleeding, number two. Number three, you need to start winning so that when people wake up in the morning, they have a sense of interest. They have a sense of hope. They have a sense of vision and positivity. Very, very important. Number four, empower your people. Turn them into a team and empower them. You can't turn this ship around by yourself. Everybody needs to be on board. Think of it like being a sports team. I'm Canadian, so I often think of hockey, right? But think of it of football, of basketball, whatever sport you want. The coach, which is what you are, the coach isn't going to go out and win that game. You need to get the teammates, the players, the people actually doing the work. They have to buy into the system. They have to buy into their teammates. They need to be empowered and they need to perform. So how do you do that? Well, there's lots of different ways to do that. We've talked about it on the show. A lot of them will continue to do that. It's really the heart of the part of the message that I try to deliver. But it's next in the step, and some easy ways that we've talked about before is a listening tour. Is you as the leader going to the people that are actually doing the work. Don't go through your middle management and your senior management and your line management, supervisors, leads, that sort of thing. Go to the people actually doing the work and have a sit down. Ask them for their help. Ask them to help you fix this business. What's good about your job? What's bad about your job? What's good about this company in your perspective? What's bad about it? And you need to find a way to do it in such a way that they feel comfortable, not intimidated, that they trust you to tell you what they think. Easy for me because I bought the company and I walk into the situation, or I'm an advisor to the company. So I'm not the person that caused the problem to begin with. If you need help with that as a leader, if you were the person that caused that problem to begin with, go get a consultant. Get a consultant to sit with you in the room or to do it themselves. Come hire me. I'll do it for you. Two things are going to happen. You're going to get a roadmap of what needs to be fixed in your business to make things better. It's going to be incredible. You don't have to believe everything every employee says, but really quickly you're going to get 6 or 10 things that are common. Like every employee is going to tell you the same 6 or 10 things. And out of those 6 or 10 things, you're going to find that you can be effective at changing 3 of them, the low-hanging fruit, 3 of them, 5 of them, whatever. There'll be low-hanging fruit that you could change. Maybe you can change it today. Maybe you can change it over a 6-month period and you can turn it into a project, but you're going to have your turnaround plan sketched out for you by the people who know what the hell they're talking about, and that's great. And the second thing that's going to happen is the employees are now going to start to feel empowered. It's not going to happen overnight, but it'll be a process. They're going to think, hey, this person values what I think. I'm part of a team. Maybe I should speak up. And you need to create that safe culture for them to want to do that. But when you do, that's the power, right? That's the trick. Okay, so what have I done? We've talked to the people about the message, the positivity, the change of culture. 2, stop the bleeding. 3, start winning, just winning at something and creating some momentum. 4, empower the people. Lots of ways to go about that. Okay, where am I? 5, access to cash. For any turnaround, I said a turnaround is taking a company from here to there. If you're on the podcast, I have my left and right hand, my left and right hands out. And sorry, my wife is distracting me with messages about whether I want to order pizza for dinner or not, which after a couple martinis, I probably will. But not right now because I'm having a drink with you. I've got my hands out and I'm saying a turnaround is going from here to there. It's going across some chasm. It's going through a transition. And the whole trick to it is not to go broke in the middle. You can't run out of money, which means you need access to cash. Maybe you need to restructure. We did that at Novani. Maybe you need to sell some redundant assets, bring in a partner, refinance with an asset-based lender, all those sorts of things. But you need access to cash because if you run out, it takes money to transition. And if you run out halfway through, you're screwed. You're absolutely done. And so that's point number 5 is don't run out of money. All right. So set the direction and the cultural change, the positivity, stop the bleeding, which means stop losing money, start winning, empower the people, figure out your access to more capital because you're going to need it. Number 6, become profitable. You're in trouble for 2 reasons. One is you're not making enough money, so you're not profitable, and or could be both, could be just one or the other. You have a balance sheet problem, which means you don't have enough cash flow and you have too much debt. Okay, make more money. What's the formula for that? Is it hoping for increased revenue? Man, if I just increased my revenue 50%, everything would be golden. Sure it will, But what are the odds of you doing that overnight? That's not very good. Here's what you focus on. Number one, contribution margin. Contribution margin is the difference between your sales and your variable costs. If you've got an online t-shirt company and you're selling for $20 for a t-shirt, and that t-shirt costs you $8, right? You're bringing in from overseas, it costs you $8. You sell it for $20, you've got a $12 contribution margin. 12 minus 8, $20 in revenue, sale price minus $8 in cost is a $12 contribution margin, which off the top of my head is a 60% contribution margin. 12 divided by 20. Okay, that's a pretty good contribution margin. You want to make more money, get a more margin, more contribution margin. Second, reduce your overhead. You want to make more money, cut your costs, your fixed costs. We've dealt with the variable costs of the contribution margin, like the cost of the t-shirt. What is a fixed cost? A fixed cost is your office space, is your real estate, is your people, not your direct labor, but your salaried people, equipment. There's all sorts of fixed costs, and you want to reduce your overhead. You want to pinch your pennies when you're in financial trouble and you want to make more money. Number one, contribution margin. Number two, fixed costs. And then third, revenue. Third, grow from that base. If I go to a company, let's say I go to a company that's done 20 million in revenue, and when I walk in the past, and when I walk in, it's doing 8 million in revenue. Do I say and it's losing a bunch of money. Do I say to myself, wow, if I could just turn that 8 million into 12 million, this company would be really profitable and I would be a turnaround hero? No, that is not what I say. What I say to myself is, I wonder if we're doing 8, what's the lowest it could possibly go? Probably 6. Let's say 6 million in revenue is the lowest that this could possibly go. How do I make money at 6? How do I improve my contribution margin, lower my expenses, so that at 6 million, I'm profitable? And then, once I've accomplished that, then I start growing. Then I go from 8 to 9 to 20 to 12 to 20, whatever. I start growing from there, but I've rebuilt my expense structure so I have better margin, lower overhead. That's what you need to focus on as the way to think about making more money, becoming profitable. That was point number 6. And then point number 7 is grow. Once you've taken a step back, like I described, so you can make more money and be more profitable, then you start growing. 1 step forward, 2 steps back is always the way. Other people say cut off a limb to save the body, that sort of stuff, okay? So number 1, here's your framework for turning around any business. Number 1, you admit your trouble and then talk to your people, communicate the new culture, which is positivity and the direction that you're going in. Number 2, stop the bleeding. Number 3, start winning. Start creating some momentum. Do it small. What you're going to find every day, you start winning a little bit, you're going to have a different energy. You're going to attract people and you're going to attract capital. Number 4, empower the people. Create a team environment. Make them care about their business again and their jobs. Not from a threat point of view, but from a wanting to participate and help the cause. Number 5, have access to cash so you don't go broke halfway through this. Number 6, be more profitable by looking at your margins first, your overhead second, and then your revenues. And lastly, number 7, grow, which is the revenue side. Grow from there. Okay, there's the formula, that my architecture for turning around any business. It works. It's worked for me. And there you go. The Instagram people got it 2 days ago, but on YouTube, thought I'd share it with you now. All right. So that's what being a framework for being a crisis leader. Now we are in the middle of I can get rid of that now. We're in the middle of a global pandemic that has been going on. What are we? We're May. It's been going on for over a year, 14, 15, 16 months now, okay? I think we're heading into our 16 months of this pandemic. And the role of leadership during the, Martinis with Scott is not a show about politics. It's a show about how to be a better leader, how to turn around a business, how to turn around your life, how to deal with trouble, how to deal with crisis, and to step up and be an accountable leader, a successful leader during that period. And so it's at a time of a global crisis, of a global pandemic, it's easy to pick on leadership flaws during that and to say, hey, this is what should have been better, right? And this would be a better way to be a leader. But I've avoided that. You'll notice I've avoided that on this show. I've avoided it for a year because last March, in March 2020, April 2020, we didn't know. We just didn't know what was going to work. It was complete uncertainty. And leaders need to, in that environment, they need to set, I did lay out a game plan for how to be a leader in that environment. Okay. And the answer is you need to have simple, clear priorities. Because if you're in a crisis, you by definition are in a time of scarcity. Okay, that's not a period of abundance. It's in a period of scarcity. It's a period of fear. It's a period of gross unknown. And so you need to have really simple, clear priorities. And then you need to try stuff. And I gave you the example a year ago of me and my businesses that I've run. I run several businesses, but across that, I set my priorities during this crisis. My priorities were three. Number one was the health and safety of my employees. I didn't want employees showing up to work, getting sick, getting COVID, and dying. Remember, this is a year ago. We didn't know the severity of this thing. We didn't know what was going to happen, right? Now I say those words, and you may say, Scott, that's not what's happening here. Maybe some of you think is worse than that, right? I'm not here to comment on that. I'm just telling you, if you think back a year ago, you'll admit that we had no idea at all what was going on. And so I had to set a priority. And so different companies that I run had different measures to accomplish that goal. But when we were considering what we were doing, what we were trying, what actions we were taking, what interim policies we were putting into place, one of the few priorities, three priorities, was the health and safety of the employees. Number two, right? Think about remote work. That was part of that. Number two was the economic well-being of my employees, and what does that mean, and the mental health that comes from that. And it was actually the other way around. It was mental health driven by economic well-being. How can I help my employees' mental health in this observed time? And I felt like communication, right? Speaking as clearly as possible, reducing risk and uncertainty. Okay, so just telling people how I'm making decisions, what we're going to do about their jobs as best as we could give that information, and do everything I can to make sure that the employees could pay their rent and could eat and feed their families, right? And whether that comes from me and my business, whether the jobs continued, or if we had to furlough or lay people off or let people go, that we help them find government programs, which were abundant at the time and maybe still are, to make sure that they were covered that way. Now, that was my second priority. Thankfully, I don't know that we laid anybody off or terminated anybody specifically because of COVID. I'm sure we fired a bunch of people for other reasons, but not because of COVID. In fact, we've maybe doubled the size of the firm or tripled the size of the firm of Sinclair Range, the consolidated entity, since the beginning of 2020. So we've had a good run that way. And my third priority, so the health and well-being of my employees, the mental health of my employees, and the third was to leapfrog the competition across the board in all the businesses, to not be paralyzed by fear, to use this crisis as an opportunity to be a turnaround leader and to push ourselves forward aggressively as we possibly can during this period. Those were my priorities. And within those sets of priorities, as a crisis leader, you try different things that work and you learn from them. You A/B test. That's what you do as a leader. You set a direction and then you try some stuff and you hope that it works. And so from our governments, from our political leaders in charge of running a country or a province or a state, I have purposely for a year avoided providing any comment because I think these leaders they needed to try stuff out. They needed to try masks. They needed to try lockdowns. They needed to try, being fully open. and they needed to try being fully closed, shutting down their economies. They needed to try different things, and I don't think they should be judged on whether it worked or didn't work. I think if you got it right a year ago, it was probably luck, right? You just had a judgment, you were trying something out, and it worked. You tried a judgment, you were trying something out, it didn't work, and a bunch of people in retirement homes died. Like I just think that it's chaos, and the leader's job is to set priorities, to set a direction, and to try different stuff out. And far be it from me in that situation to start being judgmental and to criticize. And anybody that was, I think, is just not understanding how life works and how leadership works. But that was a year ago. That was a year ago. If you haven't figured this out by now, you're no good. You're no good. I tell this to business owners all the time. If you haven't figured out 14, 16 months into this, how COVID impacts your business, how the risk of lockdowns impacts your business, how social distancing impacts your business, how online buying trends impact your business, how remote work impacts your business. If you haven't figured that out by now, you deserve to go under. This is on you. This is on you. This is not on the global pandemic. Last March, a year ago, it was on the pandemic. But now it's on you. If you haven't figured this out, you're a bad leader, okay? And I'm not saying there's a good solution. If you're a restaurant that's been, screwed, for lack of a better word, by terrible political leadership. I was in Toronto a few weeks ago, I don't remember when, and I heard on a Sunday that restaurants were allowed to be open. I got all excited. I jumped on a plane. I flew to Toronto because I had businesses there and cause to be there, and I could take the firm out for dinner. And I went to our favorite steakhouse, which you were only allowed to be on patios, but I went to this gorgeous patio at the steakhouse. I think I got in town Monday. We went out Tuesday night to dinner and took the firm out and some friends of the firm. And so the restaurants got the notification, say Sunday, from the city or the province, I don't know which, that you're allowed to open. And so, they set up their beautiful tent, which is huge, and the beautiful, straighten up all the leaseholds inside, wash all the dishes. So they order all their supplies. They call back their staff. They get their reservations in place, right? They start doing all their booking. They do the whole ramp up that would be required to restart a business of a restaurant. They open up Sunday, Monday. A Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they're open. We have a beautiful dinner there Tuesday night. But to be honest with you, it was kind of like eating in a new restaurant. It was like in a restaurant that, if you've ever gone to a fine dining restaurant that has only been open a couple of months, it's sketchy. It's sketchy. A year later, it's going to be awesome because they've kind of got into their groove. But at the beginning, it's This was a little bit better than that, but it wasn't what it used to be. Anyway, so the restaurant's open Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, the city says you have to shut down again. They weren't even open a week, and they've been shut down ever since. And that's been, I don't know, like I said, a few weeks ago. And for sure, they're going to be shut down for another month or two before anything happens. So if you're a business owner in that environment, that's pretty tough stuff to deal with. But apart from that, if you haven't figured out what lockdowns do to your business by now, and if you don't have a plan to deal with that, then that's on you. And I think now is the time, maybe it's late even, but now is the time where we just need to call enough is enough on our political leaders and the way they're handling this crisis, because the job of a crisis leader, I repeat, the job of a crisis leader is to take chaos and to provide some order, to take chaos and to provide order, okay? So let me give you some Canadian stories. I know a large part of our listening and our viewership is in the U.S. and international, in fact. But the same stuff is going on in the U.S. The same stuff is going on in every jurisdiction. I'm sitting in the province. If you're from the U.S., a Canadian province is like it's the same thing as a state. And there was a story in the Globe and Mail a few days, actually last week. I think it was last Friday, so a week ago, more or less right now. Headline was Canada's COVID-19 travel rules remain a tragic farce. This by Gary Mason, national affairs columnist at the Globe and Mail. So he says, most of us are fair-minded people who understand that battling this disease isn't easy. Decisions that governments make have far-reaching implications that can affect people and their jobs. We get all that, yada, yada. So like I've said, from the beginning, you need to be careful about judging your leaders in this unknown situation. We all understand that. I've said that from the very beginning, but this is not a mystery anymore where you're in. He goes on to say, when it comes to this, travel restrictions invoked by Ottawa is the capital of Canada. It's like saying invoked by Washington if you're in the US, continue to let us down. For instance, we've consistently refused to shut down flights from international COVID-19 hotspots until well after the deadly variants from the countries have already arrived and spread. Even then, we don't stop the planes from coming from these places. So the latest example is India, where they have the horrific double mutant virus. That's, the stats and the information coming out of India right now is just horrific. And so in Canada has a large Indian population. There's close ties between the countries. 20% of the air traffic volume to Canada is from India. I was blown away by that. So 20% of the air traffic volume to Canada is from India. But in the last couple of weeks, 50% of all COVID-19 tests at the border are from India. 50%. Because we didn't shut down international air travel. And so even though 50% is coming from India, the government keeps permitting Indian air travel. In the meantime, so let me back up. So they shut down finally about a week late or 2 weeks late. They shut down direct flights from India and Pakistan. By the way, they don't have the same problem in Pakistan for whatever reason. It seems to be mostly India, but in Canada, we just shut down India and Pakistan flights anyways, okay? But only direct flights. To this very day, it's only direct flights. If you fly from India to United Emirates to transfer, or from India to Frankfurt, Germany, which is a hub for the Star Alliance, which is an Air Canada flight into Toronto, wherever you're coming, you're all good. You're all good. It's only direct flights that are shut down. So to this day, right now, with the most deadly variant, double mutant variant in the world, we have not shut down international travel from India. We claim that we have. We claim that we shut it down. We got the virtual signaling that we're shutting things down and we're trying to look after Canadians, yet we haven't shut down the flights from India. I'm okay if you're a crisis leader, if you're a leader of the country and you stand up and you say, we're not shutting down international flights. We've got too close of ties, we got family members, we got businesses, we think it's racist, whatever your opinion is, whatever it is, I'm fine with that. What you ought not do is lie to your population and say we shut down these flights when in fact you shut down direct flights 2 weeks late. You shut down direct flights 2 weeks late, and then you didn't shut down indirect flights at all, ever, at all. If you're an Indian right now in India, you want to fly to Toronto, have at it. You just fly, just don't book a direct flight, whatever you do. Just fly through Frankfurt, fly through United Airways, fly through wherever you want to go. You fly through there, and you're going to come in, and no one's going to second guess you. In Canada, you're all sane, you're all good, and as this article says, that's insane. It says it's clear now that whatever system was put into place by governments and airlines is to ensure passengers boarding planes don't have COVID-19, that system's not working. Every day, planes touch down in the country with people aboard who are sick with the disease. I don't know if they got on these flights disease-free or if they contracted COVID-19 after they were tested, because you're supposed to have a 72-hour prior to boarding, you're supposed to have tests, or if the testing done in those places is not insufficient. I have an employee. Who in October, November 2020, whatever, she had to go home to Russia for a sick and dying family member that she wanted to be with. She flew from Toronto to Russia. I'm sorry for telling the story. I'm not going to drop your name. And she went with her sister. And while they were there, so their family member passed away, very sad time. And the next day, the whole family basically was diagnosed with COVID. And her and her sister had COVID in Russia, and they were quite sick, even though she's a young, healthy person. It hit them hard, and she was out of commission hard for a couple of weeks. And eventually, she started to come around, although she didn't feel great. And she got negative tests in Russia. So that was good for her to get on a plane and fly to Canada. So she was there a couple of weeks recovering. She got a negative test. She gets on a plane. She flies to Canada. She gets off the plane. She goes to a family house there. She's quarantined. She's not feeling great. She gets a test and she's positive for COVID. So one of two things. Either she's the second person I've ever heard of in the world who had COVID, got rid of it, and then immediately got COVID again. That's a possible thing, right? I mean, she might only be the second person in the history of mankind that happened to, but okay. Or the Russian testing of COVID is maybe a little bit sketchy. Maybe she flew unbeknownst to her with COVID and unbeknownst to Canadians, because we're too stupid in our leadership to have a system for this. Maybe we just let these people in. I'm glad we let her in, by the way. I'm not complaining about that. I'm just saying, as this article says, I don't know if they got on the flight with phony documentation saying they were virus-free, or if they contracted COVID after they were tested, or if testing being done in some of these countries is insufficient. Maybe go with the last one. Then, he says, there's a new BC, new restrictions when it comes to its neighbor, Alberta. So for those of you that aren't up to speed on Canadian geography, this is not a direct analogy, but just think to help you think about it, think New York, New Jersey, okay? Bordering states, lots of population in both states, okay? Just think New York, New Jersey, and so this is BC, Alberta. And while the virus is raging in both provinces, the BC government doesn't want Albertans traveling to its province, so it gently informed the fine people from the Wild Rose Country. That's what they call it. Alberta is like the Texas of the North. That they told them not to come, and there are even signs at the many border points between the two provinces that say "Don't come," which is bound to scare the daylights out of any cowboy with an F-150 trying to cross into BC, I'm sure. BC's Solicitor General Mike Farnworth, remember that name, said that Albertans who decide to come anyway will have to stay in the interior of the province because of a provincial edict currently in place that restricts travel among the different health districts within BC. So even within BC, they've set up, and that's the province I'm in right now, they've set up different health districts. It's basically like there's an island in BC, okay, that's like going to Long Island, like you're not allowed to leave the island. And then there's the city of Vancouver, which is like Manhattan, like you're not allowed to leave that. And then there's the whole rest of the province / state. And so if you travel from Alberta and you break the rules about traveling into BC, then he thinks, well, you're just going to stay in your region, okay, which are these smaller towns, and sort of think like northern New York State or whatever. You're allowed to stay in Utica, but you're not allowed to go to Manhattan, kind of thing. Albertans who are possibly carrying COVID-19 can hang out in BC's largest interior city, but can't even attempt to go anywhere near Vancouver. Right, gotcha. But as always, there's a workaround. Well, what's the workaround? The workaround is you're not supposed to drive across the border, but you can jump on a plane in Calgary and you can fly to Vancouver, no problem. WestJet's got 6 flights. You can go from Edmonton to Vancouver. You can go to Calgary, Vancouver. If you're an American, think Newark to LaGuardia. You can think about that, or Newark to JFK. Well, that's no problem. You're just not allowed to drive. Okay. So I come home from Toronto, and I live, because I was there for dinner, remember? And I actually went and got my vaccine as well. And I come home to my place in British Columbia, and I'm very close to the border with Alberta. So close, in fact, that my vehicles have Alberta plates because my company is in Alberta and they're registered with the company. Got a long story. So my wife now is freaked out that the people in BC are going to see the Alberta plates and they're going to key the car, or she's going to get arrested by the police for having the wrong color license plates, even though we're like 20 minutes over the border by car. The vehicle needs service. I talked to you on the show about my frustration with the Infinity people. Well, they happen to be in Alberta, whereas my car's in BC. The parts are in. I need to get the car fixed, which means I need to cross borders to go get the car. Am I allowed to do that? Am I going to get arrested on the way back? I have no idea. And this is not, it's just chaos. And this is not the only provincial areas doing this. We run a business, I own a business called Roofers World, which is in Ottawa, Ontario. That's a different province, a different state if you're not from Canada. And that city of Ottawa borders another city called Gatineau, Quebec. And it's basically one big city that crosses a provincial boundary. So just think of a big city that crosses a state boundary. I can't think of one right now, but it's basically the same city under different jurisdictions. And so the employees, the laborers, because the Gatineau side, the Quebec side is a cheaper place to live, the laborers come from the Gatineau, Quebec side, which means they have to cross the bridge because there's a river. You have to cross one of like 5 or 6 bridges in Ottawa to come over. And the Ottawa government did the same thing. They said, we're just exploding in cases. We're going to lock down. And by the way, the cases are the dreaded double Indian mutant because they came to our airport in Toronto, Ontario. But notwithstanding that, we're going to shut down the border with Quebec so that people can't drive across unless they have an essential reason. So our employees, the first day of this, came in and they drove to the border and there was a 2-hour lineup. Now they have essential letters to come into work, but there was a 2-hour lineup to get across the bridge. So they didn't wait and they drove about a mile the other way to the next bridge, which was empty. And they drove across and they got to work, no problem. The second day, they came in earlier in the day and there was no police there and they weren't asking anybody any questions because they got ahead of it. It was too early in the morning and they got to work, no problem. The third day, there was just no more cops. They just gave up on the whole regime, right? And there's just no consistency or logic or anything to these rules with the leaders, which are just flailing around trying to come up with different ideas, and it's just chaotic. It is crisis leadership that is it is a lack of leadership that is creating the chaos now. It is not the pandemic. It is not the virus creating the chaos anymore. Anywhere that I see, including in the US, it is not the virus. It is leadership. It is a complete failing in leadership that is creating the chaos, that is creating lockdowns, that is creating uncertainty in the job market, and it has a real impact on mental health, on suicide rates, on everything. On everything. There's no excuse for this anymore. Wait till I start calling it out. That was one article. But I'm going to skip this one because we're running out of time. So we have this. So this was last Friday, this article that I just reviewed with you, and this idea of stopping Alberta people from traveling, but all the exceptions, the whole thing doesn't make any sense. They also issued an edict that the police would issue tickets, $575 tickets to people that were driving across the Alberta-BC border. And then they changed their mind the next hour and they issued 3 edicts in the same day. In the same day, the government said, well, we're going to do this, here's a policy. And then they changed it to that about an hour later. And then the third time, within the same day, they changed it again so that nobody knew what the hell was going on, okay, with the rules and regulations. And as I said, this creates chaos. And what sort of real life impact does this have on people? A third article from this very same day. This is just last Friday, me reading articles. This is from the Cranbrook newspaper, which is sort of a city, 40, 50,000 people about an hour away from me. 1,716 British Columbians died from illicit drug overdoses in 2020. 1,700 people died from illicit drug overdoses in 2020, marking the deadliest year of the ongoing crisis in the province's history. For context, the population of BC is about 5 million people. So 1,700 dead in 2020 equates to roughly 5 fatal overdoses a day. The impacts of COVID-19 highlighted the immensely precarious situation of those experiencing problematic substance use in our province. It's clear that there's urgent change is needed to prevent future deaths and the resultant grief and loss of so many families. With the backdrop of the global pandemic, advocates have voiced concern that social restrictions, so lockdowns, fear of transmission, lack of jobs, leads to worsening mental health and therefore drug overdoses, and as well is it causes barriers to accessing resources and harm reduction. So you're mentally depressed, you're taking more drugs, you don't have access to the regular community resources that might be available to you because of COVID. And it's also allowed for an increase in the toxicity. There you go, toxicity of street level drugs, meaning there's a bunch more fentanyl packed into the drugs that these people are taking unbeknownst to them. So the deaths by drug overdose are up 12% from 2019. The calls are up. The calls for help are up 20% from 2019. Now, the trend was going this way anyways. I think it's artificial to say that this is because of lockdowns and social isolation and all that sort of stuff, but it's going to add to it. And I don't think that we really study this well enough. And again, this is no longer the pandemic. This is leadership failing that is causing this. The chaos created by leaders is killing people. It is killing people because leaders have had 14 months to 16 months to set on a plan, to find the resources, to do the things that need to be done to help people with their mental health, and they're not doing it, and they're making it worse, and it's killing people. It has real consequences. What other chaos does this cause? Maxime Bernier, a Canadian politician of what you would call in the US a third party. He's the leader of the PPC, which is the People's Party of Canada. Think of it as a libertarian party. Maxime, full disclosure, is sort of a friend of mine. I like him a lot. I'm not entirely down with his party, but on an individual basis, you couldn't find a better guy to have a beer with. He's a really good guy. He's traveling the country like a madman. Traveling the country, and he's holding anti-mask and anti-lockdown rallies / protests everywhere he can go. He woke me up. I was having a nap on the couch a couple of weeks ago. My phone rang. I didn't catch it on time, and I called him back. It was Maxime. He said, Scott, I'm in British Columbia. He said, I'd like to see you. That's like, let's say you live on the west coast of Texas, and I show up to Houston and I say, hey Scott, I'm in Texas, let's grab a beer. Like, people from out of the province or out of the state don't really understand how big that state is. Like, you're nowhere close. You're not just grabbing a beer, right? There has to be some planning around this. Anyways, Maxime calls me and says, hey, let's get together. I said I can't. We talked about it. We talked about his fear of everything that we talked about, a lack of leadership and the mental health crisis that it's creating. And he's rallying across the country. He's the only one in Canada who's speaking out against it. And so last week, he was in a rally in Peterborough, Ontario, which is, I don't know the size of Peterborough. I'm going to guess like 30, 40,000 people, 50, something like that. About an hour 20 away from Toronto, the biggest city in the country. And he's having a anti-lockdown rally, and he gets a ticket. He gets a ticket from the local police for contravening the ironically named Reopening Ontario Act. Clearly an act in Ontario that's geared to keeping Ontario not open, but they call it, of course, as politicians do, the Reopening Act. He posted his ticket on social media, $880 for having this protest. So, he says, I'm not going to pay it, blah, blah, blah. Which triggers a tweet response from one Fabricio Perez. If you just want to talk about how crazy people have gotten, not because of the pandemic, but because of the lack of leadership and a unifying direction which is required. And so one Fabrizio Perez tweets back, quote, "You should be arrested. You should be arrested." So who is this Fabrizio Perez? Is he some sort of wingnut on Twitter that we should ignore and I shouldn't waste my time and your time with it? Well, maybe. Fabrizio Perez is an associate professor of finance at the School of Business and Economics in Laurier, one of the main universities in Canada. In 2008, he has a PhD from Arizona State University. Research has been published in journals such as the Journal of Financial and Quantitative Analysis, Journal of Financial Econometrics, Journal of Empirical Finance, Journal of Banking and Finance, among others. You should be arrested, he says. I picked out one article for fun on estimation of multivariate asset models with jumps, published in 2019 in the Journal of Financial and Quantitative Analysis. Why did I pick that out? Because it's called estimation of multivariate. Do you remember we've talked on this show about univariate analysis and focusing on one variable, which is what idiots do, as opposed to focusing on multivariables, all of the variables in a particular situation, which is what smart people do. I gave you the example. You're sitting in an area where you're being covered in volcano ash and it's really bad for your lungs, and so your solution is to stop breathing. Just stop breathing. That's a univariable analysis. A multivariate analysis may lead you to conclude that that's even worse for you. Okay? So Mr. Perez over here, he clearly understands, or at least academically understands, the multivariate analysis, but then he further tweets, at Ford Nation, so this is a reference to the premier, governor of the state, the premier of Ontario, keeps us better than US, UK, Israel for a long time. So Premier Ford has kept us, he personally has kept us better. And when he says better, he published a chart of new COVID cases per 100,000 on a rolling average from September 1, 2020 to April 30th, 21. And for a long time, Canada was below, not Ontario, where Premier Ford is in charge of, but Canada is below these other jurisdictions of US, UK, and Israel, and then it pops, sure enough, in April, it pops above. By the way, happens to pop above just at the same time as the Indian double mutant variant, because we didn't stop travel. Just a coincidence, I'm sure, but that's when it pops above those other countries. It says the premier keeps us better than US, UK for a long time. Then Justin Trudeau, now he is the prime minister of the country, think the president, so he jumps from provincial to federal. Justin Trudeau puts us below by getting no vaccines. Clear picture. Okay, multivariate analysis. There's a bunch of reasons that you might be below the US in terms of new cases per 100,000. There's a bunch of reasons that you might then be above the US in terms of new cases per 100,000. What would those reasons be? Could vaccines be one of them? Of course they could be one of them. Clearly, the US is outpacing Canada in vaccines. I will note that Canada got up to number 30 or so on the global list after, languishing around the top 50 for quite some time. But is it just vaccines? I mean, we covered on this show that 50% of new cases came from the Indian double mutant. Okay, he seems to have missed that point. He seems to just entirely miss that point. So this fellow who thinks that he knows what a multivariate analysis is simply switched to a univariate analysis, proving he's an idiot. And he's an idiot driven by bad leadership, division, and people turning on each other. That's what's happening here. He credits a provincial person for a federal success, and then he targets a federal person for a federal failure based on a univariable analysis and misses out on everything else. And another tweet, just for the fun of it as we wrap up, is a Diane Therrien, I want to say, Therrien, the mayor of Peterborough. Remember, Maxime got his ticket for a rally/protest in Peterborough, and she tweets, as a decent person. I want you to remember that. Diane is a self-proclaimed decent person. I think, if I think my actions might harm others, I reconsider those actions. As a decent person, I think my actions, if my actions might harm others, I reconsider those actions. Fair enough. That makes sense, right? Then she goes on to say, these clowns don't give a fuck about your well-being. And if you're upset at my unprofessional language, but you're not upset about endangering others, well, ... go fuck yourself. That's her tweet. This is the mayor of Peterborough. Now, I have to say, I may love the new mayor of Peterborough. I'm all over this tweet. It certainly made me laugh, and I'm certainly happy that she's a decent person with this sort of advice. But this would not be happening. This sort of anger and division would not be happening if we were not in an environment of chaos. We are in an environment of chaos. We're here because leadership has created chaos. It hasn't created order. It hasn't taken a chaos of a pandemic and created order. It's created chaos by a lack of clear communications. It's by flawed leadership. It's from outright stupidity. Every day, my wife tells me something. She says, they're doing this, but they're not doing that. They're doing this. It's so stupid. She's the least political person you'll ever meet in your life. And everybody, you are. I'm certain you are. You're looking at the rules from the government. You're just thinking, this is ridiculous. This is just so stupid. Crisis leaders pace and lead. What does that mean? It means that they acknowledge the fear that the people they're leading are feeling. They acknowledge that. They express it. And then they provide guidance. They provide a direction. They provide a plan. Crisis leaders speak positively. They speak simply. Remember my priorities? Really simple goals. Here's what we're going to do. I'm not suggesting it has to be this way. I'm not suggesting it has to be that way. I'm not saying masks. I'm not saying no masks. I'm not saying lockdowns. I'm not saying no lockdowns. Whatever you think, but be a leader. You need to take a position. You need to be simple, and you need to be positive. I have my view on those things, by the way. I'm just not trying to express them here. Okay? What I'm trying to say is you need to be clear and you need to be simple. You need to provide direction. You need to provide the reasons for your directions. Remember I said my 3 priorities for my businesses: health and well-being of my employees, the mental well-being, the paycheck and the certainty, and leapfrog my competition. You got to set priorities, and you need to say to the populace, to the people you're leading, this is what we're going to do. You need to tell them stopping the spread of COVID is more important than drug ODs. You need to say that. If that's what you think, you need to say that. Or you need to say, we need to find some balance. Here's how we're going to do that. Or you need to say the mental health is more important than everything else. We're just going to open everything up. Like, you need to express your rationale, and then you need to make your decisions within that rationale. People will follow you. We have none of that. We have none of that in our political leadership in the US, at the federal level. Oh my God, that's bad. At the federal level, at the state level, in Canada, at the federal level, at the provincial level, at the municipal level. It's a complete shit show. It's damaging you. It's killing people. It's damaging everybody. It's creating chaos. It is a prime example of bad leadership. We can all learn from it, and it's time for us to start complaining. Hope you had a great week. That's the show. In retrospect, maybe a little heavy. But I hope you have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week. Cheers.